Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's Inside Local webinar. Thank you very much for taking the time out of your busy schedules to join us today. We really do appreciate it. We've had nearly 800 people register for today's webinar, and that is testament to not only the great topic that we'll be discussing, which is going to be very relevant for both agencies and also business owners, but also the two wonderful experts that we have joining us today. We have Martha Van Berkel, who is a co-founder and CEO of Schema app, and we have G. Chakalakis, who is the founder of Attorney Sync. I'm going to let them both give a little introduction to themselves so you understand why we've invited them to be here today and exactly why you should be listening to what they have to say. So Martha, please, ladies first, would you like to give a quick introduction to yourself?
Sure. So welcome. My name is Martha Van Berkel, and I'm the CEO at Schema app. And I spend all day, every day, talking about schema markup, whether that be for local businesses or large global enterprise, and helping people understand sort of how they can do that at scale and leverage it sort of beyond SEO across their business. My career has been spent mostly at Cisco Systems, so doing large enterprise online strategy. And I'm based in Canada.
Great, Martha, thank you. And Guy, please say a few words about yourself.
Sure. So I'm Guy Sakalakis. I'm in Chicago. I founded Attorney Sync, and actually I founded another agency called EPL Digital. It's both companies were very focused on search. For Attorney Sync, it's lawyers and it's mostly small business lawyers. So local search is a big topic for us, and excited to be here. So thanks for having me.
Yeah, guys, well, thank you very much. And Guy, you've taken part in previous Inside Local series, so thank you for giving us more of your time this time around. And Martha, who I met up with in Toronto probably about 18 months ago, delighted that we could kind of connect again. And you've written some wonderful blog posts for us over the last few months. And in actual fact, we'll try and, as we go through the kind of topics today, anything that is very kind of deep and detailed around the certain things, we'll try to send links out either on chat or in the write-up. So if people want to read more about a topic or kind of deepen their understanding, we're going to make those resources available to you as easily as possible. But it's not just us that you have helping out today, which will have a few of the BrightLocal team who will be helping answer any questions. So if you have any questions as we go, use the question and answer module. They're being monitored by two wonderful people, Matt Coughlin, who heads up our customer success team, and also Colin Nielsen from Sterling Sky. Another Canadian has kindly jumped in and said he'd be helping us, and he does that a lot for us. So thank you very much to Colin and to Sterling Sky to making yourself available. So put your questions in the Q&A box, they'll be answered. You can also ask questions on Twitter or get involved in the conversation. Use the hashtag #OptimizeLocal. It's being videoed, it's being recorded. The recap will be available on Friday. So should you need to duck off early or want to recap on anything, check back on the BrightLocal blog on Friday. You'll see the full video with any kind of sort of blemishes and glitches removed, and also have a kind of write-up recap on the kind of key takeaways from the discussion today. So brilliant. Quick plug for our next webinar in a month's time on June the 13th. We're looking at link strategies for local businesses, and I'm joined by three incredibly impressive and knowledgeable SEOs, Casey Merez, Matt LaQuesta, and Fernando Angulo. So please put that date in your diary. You can sign up today via the BrightLocal site as well, and I hope to see you on that webinar as well. Okay, so when we sort of started planning this webinar, we put lots of questions out to our audience about what they wanted to kind of hear about, and there were an overwhelming number of questions around schema. And it became clear that people had a lot of questions around schema. There was a bit of mystery, a bit of misunderstanding, a bit of sort of paranoia, maybe not knowing everything they should know about schema and how to use it. So that's kind of formed a big part of the agenda today, alongside website structuring and kind of content, and how you should start to think about kind of the content you kind of create, but with a kind of sort of view of schema in and around that. What I want to do first is I actually want to run a quick poll of the audience just to understand from the 200 people or so we have online on the webinar at the moment, what your understanding is, or your kind of confidence level around schema, and that will help Martha and Guy sort of answer your question. So you'll see the poll on the screen now. I'm just going to leave it on there for 30 seconds. If everyone could jump in and answer that would be really great. We'll probably publish this on the BrightLocal blog in conjunction with a write-up of the webinar. So I can see that we've got 58% of people have voted, which is wonderful, 60%. Please do vote. The more people we can get feeding into us, the more we can sort of tailor the content of the webinar. But also it helps us understand, how much of a concern or is an issue is the lack of understanding around schema within the kind of local search industry. So we've got 70 people people voted, 70% of people voted rather. Give it 5 seconds. And then we're also going to publish the results back. So you'll see the results very, very quickly. Okay, so we're going to close the poll and then we'll publish the results. So let's have a quick look at the results of that. Okay, so what we can see is that 10% of you are very confident, 34% slightly confident, 39% not particularly confident, and 70% not confident at all. So thank you for all those brave people who said not confident at all. I think I fall somewhere between slightly confident and not particularly confident. I think I know a reasonable amount about Schema. I certainly know that it's important and its importance is growing, but I don't pretty quite understand the full sort of spectrum of why it is. So I'm going to hand over the reins to Martha, who is our resident expert on Schema, to tell us more about it. If I can work the technology. Martha.
Excellent. Yeah, let's dive in. So what I thought I'd start is just like talking about what is schema markup and what are the benefits and how does it show up so that we all start with that same foundation in this webinar. So the first thing to know is that schema.org is sort of the vocabulary around schema markup. And it was created by Google, Yahoo, and Bing way back in 2011. So it's not something that's brand new. And it was really created so that they have a common vocabulary for their search engines to better understand the content on the page. And people will use the words schema markup, structured data, JSON-LD, microdata, those are all really the same thing. So it's code that resides on the page that's translating the explicit meaning of what the content's about so that the machines or the search engines can better understand. So if we want to go to the next slide.
Okay, yeah, next slide. There we go.
Companies, like when you go ahead and adopt this, you get rewarded. So Google's really leading in sort of how they reward businesses that adopt schema markup, and specifically with rich results. And so those rich results range from, reviews about blogs or articles to examples, to prices about products, details about company. And we've seen that even evolve even just over the last 6 to 7 months, where you're also seeing answers in search and like the local panel, or if you're asking about a phone number, it will actually show up in this search. And those are all sort of enabled by the search engines having more and more confidence about sort of what that's about or what that exact answer is. And while these, rich snippets have been the initial driver for people to adopt schema markup, now that, and we'll talk a bit later about voice, there's other things that are also using this to understand and answer questions. And so schema markup, I used to say, like, and Guy, you'll probably talk about this later, we used to write our websites so that, the machines really could understand for starters. We'd think about keywords and so forth. But all those search engines have gotten smarter. And so now the schema markup is really kind of hidden to enable the machines to understand what we're writing for humans now. And so that's really the switch, but the role that schema markup plays. Now the benefits go, again, beyond just the rich snippets. If you want to go to the next slide.
Yeah, just very quickly, just kind of,
sure.
I guess for those who felt they weren't sort of confident about it, let me go back. So schema markup is essentially it's code or the way you kind of tag content on your own website so that search engines absolutely know what that bit of content is about.
Correct.
And they can kind of categorize it. And you mentioned there in terms of the transition from writing for search engines to writing for users. It seems to be a little bit like, search engines obviously will index content and understand it. Are they asking us to now make it clearer for them to understand it so that actually when we write the content itself, we can be more human in terms of the actual phrasing of the words and not have to worry about how search engines interpret it, because behind the scenes, we're giving them these clear pointers
Correct.
and signposts. Right.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and really the understanding is like, how do we explain it? I usually use the word like explicitly, but like really, really clearly. And so even on some things where, we often use the word Java, right? Like, so when I say the word Java, what do I mean? Like, do I mean the country in Indonesia? Do I mean coffee? Do I mean the programming language? And so sometimes they can figure that out through the context of where the word is in. But now we have the power to like tell them, no, I mean Java, as in, the country, or I mean, London, Ontario versus London, England. And so again, at some of these, they're getting smarter about understanding, natural language processing in the context. But now we can be in control of exactly how they understand it.
Okay, so they're basically, they've developed this common language to enable all of them to really understand what our content is about. But now the onus is on us as
totally
digital marketers or businesses to employ it and make use of it.
Yeah, it's sort of smart on their part. Like, we're going to make their job easier, and then they're going to reward us for it.
Okay, Okay, great. You wanted me to go to the next slide. Let me do that.
So I always like to talk about the benefits beyond just rich results, because when the search engines can truly understand what you're a business about, you actually get more than rich results. And we'll talk about Google features that are out there, sort of that they explicitly call out that you can get, but there's a lot more than that. So first thing is that only 30% of websites do some schema markup. And so there's currently still an opportunity to stand out in search results to maybe some of your competitors, especially if you're doing SEO for local businesses. You know, the bakery shops in town may not be aware of this sort of advanced search engine optimization tool. And so it's a great way to differentiate sort of to the search engines. The second thing is when you get those rich results, if you can get those, they're saying like anywhere between 20 to 82% higher click-through rates. And hopefully Guy will share some examples of what he's seen for some of his clients. And then they've also shared about how when you have schema markup, you experience more time spent on the page or lower bounce rate, or what I like to call quality of traffic and leads. So if the search engines are really confident about perhaps a service that you offer or expertise you have based on content, you know, they're going to match you with searchers who are looking for that content. And so the people who are landing on your page are actually going to be the right people, the people who truly want to find that information. And we've seen this in spades. And so when you think about sort of the things you measure in SEO, not only are you going to get better visibility in search results, higher click-through rate, longer time on page, you know, more pages viewed during a visit, it's going to also result in higher conversion. And so we're seeing schema markup sort of, because it helps really build confidence with the search engines, provide value across that customer experience on your site.
Okay. Guy, I'm going to ask you a question here. Come on, there about 30% of sites using schema markup. Now you work in the legal niche with, you know, I think a majority of independent or sort of smaller sort of legal practitioners. Does that 30% sort of seem correct for you for local businesses, and particularly in the industry you work in?
Yeah, well, it's probably high. Most, especially if they're self-managed websites, right? So like lawyers, if you're a lawyer who is marking up your own schema, great for you. You are way ahead of the bell curve. Everybody else is still, you know, figuring out how to implement TSL security and stuff like that and get mobile friendly. So I think it's a really low, but that's what makes it such a great opportunity and a competitive advantage. And Martha mentioned this, and this kind of ties into we tend to think, everybody tends to think of the snippets, which are extremely valuable. But as Martha mentioned, the impact on the user, if you buy into that Google cares about what the user signals are sending in terms of ranking, there are certain snippets that, at least indirectly, are playing a role in how and where you are showing up in search results. And my view also, in addition to all the snippet stuff, is I think we're at the tip of the iceberg, right? So as we move into like the Internet of Things and voice, and I know Martha's going to talk a lot about that later, this is the stuff you need to be putting on your site. And if you adopt it early, you're going to have a huge competitive advantage over sites that are still relying on, you know, their Flash websites to show up in search results. And maybe that's a little bit aggressive of a example, but the point being that this is a great time to focus on this added huge competitive advantage. And I am of the belief that actually it plays a role in how you appear for a variety of searches. So do it.
We often say that 30% of websites are doing it, 5% are doing it well. Okay.
Okay. Yeah, good.
And given that it's obviously it's something that's been sort of brought together by a number of the sort of top search engines, you know, not just the English language ones, Yandex as well, I believe, is sort of involved in it. That if these are the guys who got together and they're sort of pushing this, then we should listen to that, shouldn't we, as digital marketers? They're kind of giving us a clear, you know, signal to what they want us to be doing, and why would we ignore that? Because I'm sure we'll go through some more sort of implementation aspects of schema, but it's not that tricky. It's not that demanding, particularly for local businesses, to kind of use kind of schema kind of correctly. So, you know, we shouldn't be ignoring this, because the impacts is only going to benefit us now and more so in the future. So
Miles, sorry, I was gonna say, like, often if you look at like Google's search documentation is all about schema markup and structured data. And so there's got to be something to it, right? Like that's where they're focusing the efforts around documentation.
Okay. And the other thing that I would throw in there too, just in the context of like the search engines wanting to be able to deliver better results, like what better way to be able to distinguish between two businesses than to actually use some attributes that human beings would use in the real world to distinguish between two businesses. So in the context of legal, just as a quick example, if you actually can provide and validate that you're an experienced lawyer that's been practicing for 35 years and you've got all these positive reviews and yada, 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 doesn't it make sense that the search engine would want to at least consider that? Because those are some of the things that we as human beings use to distinguish between businesses. So like, makes sense to me.
Absolutely. Okay, let's, Martha, I'm not sure if you had any more slides. Let me just check.
There's just one about
Yeah.
case studies. So if you want to read more and see sort of what Google's talking about now in the search documentation, they've included some case studies, and these are great because they give some great examples of the piece. And if you're trying to do a business case, like to convince someone to do this, there's some great evidence there.
Okay, great. Now a bit of more sort of technical detail here, sort of Martha. Maybe you can just give us a sort of 60-second sort of rundown on, I guess, the different types or ways to implement schema.
For sure. So in the past, people primarily used microdata. RDFA is less used, but microdata is when the schema markup is actually with like across the page or like embedded with the HTML. And this makes it a bit fragile so that if someone changes the page layout or someone's coming in and changing areas of the page, like it can make your schema markup break. And so since about the last year, but even like for the last 2 years, Google has supported JSON-LD. And if you go to the next slide, JSON-LD is where the schema markup resides in an actual block. And so with the JSON-LD, what's great is that it's less brittle, so that it's actually like in a block, so people don't touch it. It's also easier to read, so you can see sort of what properties are there and what properties aren't there. And it's actually recommended by Google now. So whenever you're doing schema markup these days, we recommend doing JSON-LD, whether that be producing it through a generator, a tool, or sort of deriving it and building sort of a JavaScript block.
Okay, and that's what your business does. Is that right, Martha? You help companies implement schema kind of correctly on their websites and take away some of the sort of technical pains in doing that.
Yep, that's exactly what we do, so that you can focus on strategy and understanding what you need to mark up, and then never have to write code and never have to copy and paste it into your site.
Okay, Guy, in terms of, I mean, if you were sitting down with a friend of yours that had a local business, and they came to you and said, "I've just heard about this thing called schema," what would be your advice for them as a next step? Say they had a web development guy, what would you sort of say to them as the things that they should do next?
Well, if they have a web development person, I would certainly have them ask the web development person if they are familiar with and implementing the appropriate markup. And you can also, the other thing I would do too is say, hey, here's a link to the validator tool, and you can go look in and see to make sure that there's schema on your site. And if there's not, it might be time for a new web development guy or girl. And I think the other thing too is that it depends on the type of business it is. So, local business is kind of a no-brainer, but for law firms, there's a specific legal services schema, and so they should be using the appropriate ones they can. But I think if you were like, what's your one schema you should add? No doubt about it. It would be some form of aggregate review schema, just because the review snippets for the businesses that we tend to work with tend to be the most impactful, because whether someone looks you up by your name or your business name, we all have the expectation today that we can go and see what other customers, clients, people in the community think about you and your business. And the little stars that are generated from the review markup, they jump off the page and they make a big difference. And so being able to control that, and obviously you need to follow the guidelines so that you're implementing these. If you're going to implement review markup on your site, make sure you're following the guidelines, because you don't want to get in trouble. But those are the ones that come to my mind. The review markup, local business markup, those are kind of the basics for me and most of the businesses we work with.
Okay, I'll just jump back to a previous slide so everyone can see. What it says here, this is a sort of essentially a screenshot taken from Google. There's sort of 4 stars, a rating, a number of votes. That is basically done through schema markup. So when he's talking about the kind of review snippets, the review markup, that's what you can achieve by having the correct use of schema on a web page. Google starts to display the star rating and the review count within the Google search results. And obviously the impact of that is an enormous boost in kind of click-through rate. That's right. We did a study not too long ago, I think maybe 12 months ago, looking at the impact of star ratings within local search results in the local pack and also in kind of Google results. And I don't quite remember the statistic. I probably should do. Maybe I'll ask some of our kind of content guys to put that in the sort of chat. But there was a nice bump in conversion rate from when people are looking at a range of businesses, either in the local pack or in the kind of organic results, and people were definitely selecting the businesses that had a star rating because it kind of de-risked their choice. They were looking at essentially a bunch of anonymous businesses they didn't know about. So which, how do they narrow down the option? Well, they look to see who's got the best rating, and there aren't that many businesses really making use of kind of review snippets and review markup in organic anyway. And so if you can kind of start to get that onto your page and being pulled into the search results, you will see more traffic coming through to your site. Brilliant. Okay, guys. So thank you for running through that.
Do we want to talk a bit about review schema markup now that we're on the topic?
We could do. We had it a little bit later on. I think I tell you what. Let's come to it because we're going to come to it later on. We'll give it plenty of airtime because it is a very important piece. I'd also like to say that Martha wrote a lovely blog post for us probably about 2 or 3 months ago, just giving a nice overview introduction to what schema is for local businesses and how local businesses should understand it. So I'm going to get our guys working behind the scenes to put a link to that blog post in the chat. So after the webinar, if you want to go and just kind of deepen your understanding about it, or just kind of shore up certain elements of your understanding, that's a great place to start. So please look out that in the chat box, and we'll also link to it from the webinar right up on Friday as well. Okay. The next question, this is a bit of a sort of, I guess, a sort of slightly kind of leading question. And the reason we wanted to put this question in, what is the role of a local business website in 2018, is that what we're seeing with kind of Google's sort of rolling out of new sort of search engine features, such as the knowledge panel, which appears on the right-hand side, or the kind of answer boxes, is that people are being able to get more information directly from within search results pages, and also able to interact. But a lot of interact directly with the business without having to go to the business website. So, essentially Google is starting to send less people to business websites because people can get the information and interaction they want directly from within the search results. And I think, as Guy said, we're seeing the tip of the iceberg in this area. So I want to talk to you both about what you felt was the role of the local business website, and is it going to get less important, more important? Is it going to morph into sort of something that is different from today? Guy, what's your take on this?
Yeah, so I still think that the local business website plays a role. I know there's a lot of conversation about how Google's the new homepage for local businesses, and it's certainly changing, right? And it depends on what kind of business you're in. So restaurants are probably going to be their websites are going to be impacted, I think right now in the short term, a lot more than say law firms, because you can order right through Google search result. You don't have to even get through the page if you want to order a meal or something like that. But for a law firm, the website still plays a significant role because especially for more sophisticated legal services consumers, the website becomes the place where they can see things that you've published as a lawyer. Maybe they see some video or testimonial, but they're going to learn a lot more about you by getting to your website. And your website still, at least the firms we work with, is still the primary, well, maybe it's not becoming as primary, because Google My Business for less sophisticated legal services consumers, so someone that searches like something attorney, we're seeing a lot of calls right from the GMB listing. And so that's an example of a user journey that's ending on the search result page. But I still think that we can see it in analytics. There's still a lot of conversion taking place on local business websites. And so the website is your opportunity to validate your unique business propositions. And so taking kind of closing that last step of conversion, that's really where I see the website. And of course, still, your website can still be a vehicle for answering questions and earning meaningful attention beyond just the answers that show up in a website. So I still think it plays a big role.
Okay, Martha?
So I think today it plays a big role, but what we're seeing is sort of new, like I'll call them channels, or way for people to interact with us, with the goal that they're still getting to what they need. So we're still getting the phone call or the conversion at the end, but we're at the beginning, I think, where we're going to see a lot of change or sort of new players coming in that are ways that people are going to interact with us. And so the website still plays a role of being the container of the information for the search engines and other interactive modes to get get information about the business. And so I don't see in the short term that changing. But, 5 to 7 years out, that might really change, because we're seeing, voice search, like all these assistants are asking questions about the business and trying to have that engagement. We're seeing it in the search results. And then as we talk about Internet of Things or other things that are connected to the web, we're going to get to choose how we interact. So whether it be through a Google Lens or so forth. But I think as a business, we're still going to see that interaction. We just might see it coming through different means. And I was sharing, Miles, with you earlier. I had the opportunity to sit down with Guha at Google on Monday, who's the creator of schema.org. And he and I had this exact conversation, and we were talking about like the 5 to 7 year out that might change. But in the meantime, it's like, how do people still interact with that information? And so the website today is the container for the schema markup that's providing that information to those users or to those assistants and so forth.
So you met with the guy that came up with schema.org.
I did.
What did he say candidly about his vision of the future of a website?
Yeah, so he like I said, like in 5 to 7 years, he doesn't know if the website will be as relevant. I often talk about sort of managing your brand for machines, and it's sort of very aligned to kind of his vision of where, managing your brands for machines is actually making sure machines understand the things you offer, the things you sell, where you're located, who your people are, the services you offer, and will that require in 5 to 7 years a website or not? And he and I are in agreement that we think it'll play less of a role then.
And obviously, one of those machines that's making waves today is virtual assistants, or those, the assistants and sort of voice search. How does Schema help with voice search?
So let's use Alexa as an example. So we've talked a lot about Google, but Amazon's sort of really, really coming on and sort of playing in this space as a big search engine and leading the voice assistant space. And Alexa, even in their documentation, is saying for local businesses, they're using schema markup in order to answer questions about that business. And so if we use Alexa as sort of being the leader in the assistant space, we can be confident that not just Alexa, but Google Assistant and Google Now, they're all using it, because especially in voice, like there's a lot more risk if you get the answer wrong. And so when we talk about schema markup, providing understanding, and Google's been sort of standing on stage at events like PubCon and so forth, saying like, do structured data in schema markup because it helps us understand. Well, understanding brings confidence. And if those voice assistants have to be confident in the answer, it would make sense that they're going to leverage it really, really broadly.
Okay, brilliant. Okay, guys, that's great. Let's go on to the next session. This is, talk about local businesses and effective use of schema. In fact, I'm going to run our next poll at this point in time. So he's going to put the next poll on the screen. We're just doing 2 polls today, by the way. Okay, so please take some time to answer this. So, what percentage of time do you spend on content creation or the management of content for a typical SMB? It could be your own business. It could be kind of customers' businesses. So again, guys, just put it on the screen for 40 seconds. Please do take the time to answer to really help us out. And it would also inform a little bit of the conversation that we're going to have today, and also a sort of future kind of blog post that we've got. We're up to 50% of people voted. Thank you very much. Come on, guys, let's get us up to 75% so we can get to near that kind of 200 respondent point. Would be great. Okay, over 65% now, getting close. So I'll just give it another 5 seconds or so, and then we'll show the results back to you. Okay, great. Why don't we shut it down now, and then we'll share the results back with you. So in terms of the time that people are spending on kind of content as an activity, this is what you guys are telling us. Okay, so it's pretty even, anywhere between sort of, up to sort of 0 to sort of 60%. Everyone is spending around a quarter of their time. So some people are almost spending up to sort of a third, sort of a third of their time. Okay, brilliant, guys. Thank you very much for doing that. That's interesting, and it certainly highlights how much of a significant role kind of content and content creation and management has for local businesses. So, Guy, got a question for you. Obviously, you run a digital marketing agency. A quick question for you: How many people have you got in the organization?
About 15 full time.
Okay, great. And roughly, how many kind of clients have you worked with since 2008, when I think you started?
Oh, hundreds, I would say. Maybe thousands, maybe hundreds for sure.
So you've got a little bit of experience.
A little bit.
little bit. When you work with that many kind of customers and you've got that bigger team, when you're thinking about, the website, either developing a new one or taking on a new kind of customer and adding to it, do you have a blueprint for, what an ideal structure that you want to kind of implant onto that sort of business? Or do you have a process that helps you generate that? I mean, do you have I wouldn't say I'm going to away from a template in terms of everyone gets the same thing, but to a kind of blueprint for what the ideal structure and range of content should be? Or do you have a process for establishing that for each client you go through? And with either of those, what is it you like about it? I mean, you don't get to be in the business as long as you have with that many customers without being able to have an element of sort of systemizing of the work you do to produce, results efficiently and effectively.
Yeah, it's funny that this question actually is very timely because it just came up in this Facebook group of agency owners that I'm on, and the question was, how much of what you do is, template process, and how much of it is kind of custom. And I said that for us, I think about 80% is custom and 20% is like more process. And I said there are some things I think that we could do a better job creating process on, but because there are a couple layers to your question there. My thing is the biggest blueprint that I can share is auditing the site, right? So if you've got an existing site, figuring out crawling the site, looking at the code, what's the structure, what does the content look like, and not just like the basics, but like the more nuanced things that you can. A lot of the crawlers the commercial crawlers are becoming very sophisticated. They're providing all sorts of awesome data. There are a lot of nuanced signals that you can look at in terms of content, not just in terms of like how many characters on a page. But for us, that's really the auditing process is where all of this stuff comes out of, and then you've got to build, you got to fix what needs to be fixed and build what needs to be built, and that tends to be a little bit more custom. But the other thing that I always, in terms of like how much of what we do is focused on the content, in some way, almost everything we do touches some aspect of content, right? Because whether it's link building or whether it's content ideation or whether it's not even necessarily related specifically to search, your page, like that's the thing that you can focus on. I mean, frankly, even if you're not even talking about your website, like Google My Business, the photos, the images that you choose to use there, the videos you choose to use there, the description field that you fill out, all of that stuff, it's content. And so I don't see how you can, I mean, to me, it's like that's the essence of what we're doing is trying to create content that whether it's for conversion, whether it's to earn traffic, whether it's to gain links or do something else SEO-y, it's all, a lot of it touches content. So I hope that somewhat answers your question, but it's custom because, especially for local businesses, the language that people use, especially at a very local level, like neighborhoods, streets, zip codes, the local businesses, the organizations, that's a very specific thing to a geography. And then if you add on top of that a vertical specific concept like legal, it gets even more specific. So it's like you get geographic and business specific language that has to be used to develop your content. So creating a blueprint overall that if someone's like selling you like a package of content that's like they're using for a bunch of different clients, my guess is it's not going to work as well as if they're actually like doing the research and the ideation and content development process, but at least that's my approach.
Okay, great. When you're talking about there's also different types of content. You've got, content that's about a business. You've got kind of landing page content that might be around the location of that business or kind of service type of content. And then you've got, I guess, the more kind of creative content or kind of authority building content that you might typically have or traditionally have put in a blog. When you're looking at the sort of site or where the prioritization of that content, so you've got a new customer and you've got the opportunity to just not start again, but refresh everything. What is the most important place to start with updating the content so it has the most power? And what sort of, what stuff do you leave to the end? Because actually it's not going to move the needle to the same amount as the stuff you start with.
Great question. So, at the risk of the answer everybody hates, it depends on the business, but let's talk about like professional services in general. So lawyers, accountants, that kind of thing. The attorney bio, so the professional bio page, really, really important. Testimonial pages, really, really important. If you have frequently asked questions section of your site, those are really, really important because even though everybody loves the concept of going after these head terms, that everybody's like, oh, this is like that, everybody's searching for personal injury lawyer or divorce lawyer because they're so far down the funnel. People forget that the overwhelming majority of searches they're nothing to do with that. They're not business lookup searches, they're research. So it's like, what are the consequences of filing a divorce or something like that in the legal context? And so making sure that your content that answers those questions, that responds to it's not the practice area page. Like everybody's like, oh, I got to get my practice area page right because that's what's going to drive traffic. And it's while those are really qualified searches, that doesn't tend to be where the the majority of the searches come from. And then on top of it, we know that 15%, at least last time I saw the update, 15% of searches have never been performed before. And so the longer tail type pages. And I'll say one more thing on this. I'm kind of talking out of rambling here a little bit, but don't create a blog post for every possible question you can come up. This is a great example of where the schema and the organization of your content comes into play, because if you're just creating a singular blog post for every question, you're going to cause all sorts of problems for search engines, but also for users. And the search engines are getting a lot better at saying, we're going to rank this page that covers a lot of these topics for a variety of these queries, not in a different page for every single one. So if you want to show up in featured snippets, if you want to show up in people also ask, if you want to show up in the answer box areas, you really want to start thinking about structuring that frequently asked question type of content, and that's the stuff that I would make a priority, because those research queries for your business, those tend to be the higher volume, they're less competitive, and even though people might be a little bit earlier on in the quote unquote funnel, that's where I think there's a lot of opportunity for businesses that people aren't taking as much advantage of.
Okay, I want to come back to you in a second with a question around conversion from those types of pages, Guy. But Martha, there's obviously kind of clear areas on your site that you can mark up certain bits of content, like your name, address, phone number, all that kind of address related stuff. Obvious reviews you've talked about, and we will touch on again. But G's talking about more kind of content pages, FAQs, right, or potentially kind of blog posts. What role does Schema have on those types of pages, and how should people be making sure they use Schema effectively?
So let's talk a little bit about FAQ pages, just because that was really specific recommendation, and so I can talk to that, and then let's talk about how we decide where you add Schema, where those priorities are. Mm-hmm. So for FAQ pages, there's actually question and answer schema markup, and there's actually a blog on our site that talks about how to do that. And what's great about it is you're actually being clear about this is the question and this is the answer. And then you can also use this great field called about, where you talk about what is the topic that this is about. And then you can also link it to your organization to talk about that this is also being published by, attorney company 2, right? Or whatever you're called, right? Martha Legal. And so here then you're making it easier to understand the question and answers, and also sort of connecting the dots between sort of the organization. And there'll be a theme you hear from me around schema markup, is that it's just not code on one page, but it's actually connecting the dots between the different pages in your brand. And that's what we would call a knowledge graph. So where you're actually saying that, this is the review about this service that's offered by this company. And so you want to sort of connect those dots. And so question and answer schema markup, and then using some of those properties is key. I think the other one I always often ask, and Guy, you can kind of see, is when I ask about what's schema markup, I usually ask 2 questions, what's strategic about your business, right? What is it, the things about your business that are important? So it could be the person, if you're doing professional services, it could be the services, the products, how to get hold of you, and who you are. So I always say there's kind of 5 core pages, the local business or the locations, the product, the services, the people, and the contact information. And like outside of the things that are then like, what are your customers asking questions about, which kind of plays to the FAQ that Guy was just talking about. And so like if you have those things covered as a small or medium-sized business doing locations, then you're sort of 80% there.
Okay, great. Guy, coming back to you, I've got two questions. I've got 1,000 questions, so I'm going to try and narrow it down to just two of them. You talked about obviously kind of FAQ content pages, reaching customers who are not further down the funnel. They're not about to convert. They're just like someone who's, my God, about to get divorced, so thinking about it but hasn't yet thought I'm going to take the plunge. On those sorts of pages, how do you get people to convert from those pages? And is conversion the aim for every page on your site? And do you want to try and get different types of conversion at that point versus people who land on a bio page who really are looking for someone to help them out right here and now?
Yeah, so I'll kind of answer that in a couple of ways. So yeah, that'd be great if every page converted into something that became a customer or client. And so we always say, the kind of way we put it is, you want to reduce the friction for someone to be able to convert. So things like contact information. So especially for professional service, if you make it difficult for someone to contact you, then fix that. But at the same time, I'm not trying, like every single page isn't like here, buy my service or sign up for whatever. Some of them, so in some of these frequently asked question pages, the conversion might be download our guide on understanding your rights in a divorce in the state or something like that. So so from a conversion standpoint, I don't know if we're going too far afield here and getting off topic, but from a conversion standpoint, turning that search into a more nurtured lead or relationship, that's the conversion event that we'd probably be focusing on for those higher funnel type of queries. So getting somebody on, getting their email, getting them to opt in, to subscribe, getting them to connect with us on a social platform. All of those types of things should be viewed as, we call it indirect conversion events. But I think that businesses, and with some advice from marketers that's maybe a little bit too aggressive, of making every single page a live chat thing pops up to say, hey, are you ready to sign up? It's like, that doesn't fit with the experience of what the searcher was looking for. So thinking about the searcher's intent, delivering on the searcher's intent on the page, and then providing them means to quote unquote convert that aren't necessarily sign up. That's really what we tend to focus on. So the whole key and I think it sounds like stating the obvious, but I think people miss this all the time, is to make sure that what you're providing the user meets what they're looking for. And while you want to nudge them in the direction of moving down the funnel, you can't force them down the funnel. And so if you're seeing a lot of abandonment on those types of pages, like you got to figure out, you got to offer them something different, because what you're offering them isn't satisfying what they were looking for.
Yeah, that's great advice, actually. You can be too aggressive, can't you? Or you could be too singularly focused on converting right here and now. And actually, you've just got to nurture that relationship, build that trust, particularly with something as sensitive as getting a divorce. You're playing with someone's a very emotional part of their lives. I imagine it's different for different industries. I imagine if someone went to a pest control site, it's not quite the same emotional sort of level. So I guess you just got to kind of gauge the business, and the kind of the page they're on, and potentially where that person is in that in the sort of purchase funnel. Back to the sort of blending kind of content with Schema. When do you start to think about Schema when you're planning kind of content? When does a conversation involve bringing Schema in?
So if it's a brand new site, very, very well, the answer is early on both of what I'm about to say. But if it's a brand new site, even earlier. If it's an existing site, it's still something that's part of the audit process we want to make sure that we're thinking about. But and Martha mentioned this earlier, Google has all sorts of great documentation. In fact, we could probably post the link in the chat to their both the if we haven't, the Schema documentation, but also they have like a whole section on snippets now. And so features, if you can features, right? Thank you. That's right. That's what they call it. So the documentation on features, you can, if you have the opportunity that a feature that they publish about that is certainly if it's generating a snippet, but that they've got documentation on, and it's relevant to your business, you should be trying to implement it, is my opinion. So I would just take the features list and say, can I publish something on my site that's relevant to this feature? Yes, and then we should be creating a content strategy around that and making sure we have the appropriate markup. But again, Martha mentioned this. They're telling you what's important, and they're telling you what they're going to reward you for. So don't abuse it. Don't try to start creating like recipes for your law firm necessarily, but where you can take advantage of it, I would certainly encourage that should be top of your priority list.
And Miles, I do have a slide that shows like the list of features. So, and there's a document they can maybe share in the chat, which is like how to create a schema markup strategy for your website. And it talks about, what are those important pages that I talked about? And then the second question is then like, well, what Google features can you actually get? And you should be doing both of those things, right? So don't just do the features in absence of describing the important things about your business, but make sure that you're sort of calling that out. Yeah, so it's, there's a features list. No, there's like a features list with a picture of Google's structured data documentation. But I think more than anything, yeah, there it is. Look through the important things on your website and then incorporate these, because the reviews might be like, do we have reviews about our services? It might be like, well, we have lots of reviews about our business, but we don't have reviews about the services, or we don't have reviews about the specific locations of our business. And so that's where, it's not just a review strategy, but it's, hey, we can add aggregate review across, our blogs, about our articles, about our locations, and then you can sort of start implementing that across content. And then I think the only other thing I would add, like when you say like really early if you're planning content, Google, Yahoo, Bing, and Yandex have described exactly the things they want to know about certain topics, right? So if you go to schema.org, it does read like a dictionary, so don't get too scared, but it'll tell you, if you look up local business, Google only highlights about 20% of the things you could use to describe your business. So you're using the example about a person, the person alumni of is a great one. Actually person isn't even on this list, and services aren't on this list, which are like two great schema markup opportunities. But go and look at that list, and then you can actually see sort of these additional things like, the company was founded in. Like, wouldn't it be great if you knew that the company's been around for 100 years versus one that's been around for 2 years? So I would say, once you get comfortable with the basics and getting some of these, really look at schema.org to look beyond the basic properties.
Yeah, and it really is extensive, and I think I knew what I thought. I thought I knew a reasonable amount about it. When you start to look through the feature list and looking exactly what is possible, you realize that, and they're only adding to this, aren't they? They're only kind of building this out and building up new kind of feature sets or new areas that you can apply schema to, correct?
And for local business, we do have an ultimate guide to local business that talks about sort of which of those additional properties we recommend and on top of that. And so that's, again, a great resource for people to use.
Okay.
And you'll notice it because we're right after Google and schema.org. So with a rich snippet, you can't miss
all right, we'll try and get the link out in the chat so everyone's got that. We're going to talk a minute about multi-location businesses, but I just want to talk to Guy about kind of creative, the kind of ideation process for kind of content, because I know, you work in such a competitive niche, Guy. Legal services is, if not the most competitive sort of niche. So when you want to kind of create standouts, both in terms of, actually achieving visibility within the sort of search engines, but also creating standouts so that you get higher kind of click-through rates. How do you achieve that with kind of content creation, and how do you, what's involved in your ideation process when you're dealing with such a competitive and pretty saturated market?
Yeah, so great questions, and there's a lot of different ways to approach the ideation process, but I was going to try to speak into the context of local and snippets and schema stuff. And one of the big things I think that's really important is to go out and for your target queries to see which of the queries search engines are already giving, whether it's a featured snippet or some kind of special treatment in the search result, and start trying to make that a priority in your content development process. Because again, I think eventually you want to work through and add as much as you possibly can. But if you're trying to prioritize things and you're just getting started, go where you already know you're going to get the most short-term reward. So if there's a set of queries or a keyword universe where you're seeing a lot of featured snippets, you're seeing a lot of review markup, or review snippets, make that a priority is what I would suggest. The other thing that I think that people overlook too much is they don't spend enough time doing the research on, particularly in the context of legal, who their audience is and where their audience is. So people use very local and regional language to describe things. And most business, whether it's lawyers or whether it's other business owners, the way that the business owners talk about their business and what they do is often so vastly different than what their clients or customers use to describe what they do. So spending time, whether it's surveying existing clients and customers or asking other people in the community, but spending time really understanding how they actually, how your target audience uses search to find answers, that should be like the biggest priority. And then you can go, once you have that stuff, now you can go back and start organizing your site, adding whatever sections you want or whatever schema is appropriate. But to me, getting super hyper local and seeing like what are the other businesses, who are the people, who are the organizations, all that kind of stuff, in terms of converting and attracting attention in search, that's to me the priority.
And when you're coming up with those ideas, you're coming up with this, a vast range of topics and titles to start with. What kind of metrics or KPIs do you use to validate and therefore prioritize what content you create first, or what content you put to one side?
Yeah, so some of it, the basics are the volume, right? So volume, competition, but really, I would say that it's kind of morphing into this idea of intent. And so where there's high intent and it meets the kind of the geographic parameters of where we're trying to earn business, those are the ones that I put towards the top of the list. So I'm not, the days of like going into Keyword Planner and saying, oh, well, there's 1,000 searches for personal injury lawyer a month from the Keyword Planner, and so I'm going to optimize for personal injury lawyer. I think that's a mistake. I would get into like the really, like what are people, and social media is a great place for this too, because you can actually go into the social media site and see the language people are using when they're trying to describe the problems that they have that your business solves, and then optimizing for that kind of stuff. So yeah, the validate, I mean, at the end of the day, if you're an agency, I don't know if we've got a lot of agency folks on here, but at the end of the day, the validation for the strategy is money, right? Like you signed up new clients, you sold more products, you got more service. That's ultimately what we should be measuring marketing on, in my opinion. Not on like, oh, I got a bunch of traffic that's untargeted, but as you walk your way back, it's going to be targeted, qualified leads. You walk your way back from that, it's going to be targeted traffic. Walk your way back from that. Maybe you have some more fuzzy marketing metrics like awareness and brand engagement and that kind of stuff. But at the end of the day, in terms of like prioritizing like what we're focused on to try to validate the idea or the strategy that we're implementing, we've got to be able to tie it to some kind of tangible business metric.
Do you ever include things like link worthiness or the capacity to generate links from content as a determining factor about whether you will create a piece of content?
Totally. So, and I take a lot of heat for this. Like, I'm a big links person. I love the idea of Google getting to the point where you just talk into it and it spits back the right answer every time. Well, let me tell you, in legal, we are a long way away from that. There is stuff that you would be shocked. You're like, that's not supposed to work, right? The Google people come out and say that doesn't work, and that's going to get you a manual action, and all that kind of stuff that worked in 2005, and it's not supposed to work. And let me tell you, in some segments, it's still working. So now, again, I'm not advocating for black hat, go crazy, anything like that. However, I am advocating for create content that is likely to earn local links. And I don't get obsessed about domain authority and don't get obsessed about follow versus no follow. But if you put something on your site that people in your local community will find valuable, whether it's the local news or whether it's local schools or local nonprofits or other businesses in your community that might be interested in linking to that stuff, that's the content I would make a priority in terms of link worthiness, because let me tell you, in my world, it moves the dial.
Okay, let's go. We're going to go on to kind of multi-location in a second. One final question around links for you, Guy. If you could get a link from a local site with local kind of content relevance versus a link from a legal site with legal content relevance, which one would you choose?
So if you're forcing me to choose between topical relevance and geographic relevance, I would, for me, because most of our clients in the local and are servicing local consumers, I would take geographic relevance over topical relevance, because not only will if you get a local news site might not have any topical relevance, but you're going to get an audience of people that are in your local community, and so a lot of those, in addition to all of the SEO greatness you might get from that, you're also likely to attract visitors, subscribers, and customers.
Great, thank you, great answer. Let me just now get through to the next part of the slide deck, and where are we? Sorry, Martha, we're going to jump over the review guidelines because we're running fairly close to the end. We did touch on it a bit. So let's talk about multi-location business, and I think the key thing here is doing these things at scale. Once you've got beyond 10 locations, let's go with you, Martha. For multi-location businesses, is Schema a real pain, when you've got to implement it over and over again, or is there a fairly simple way of doing it?
So there's a couple different ways to do things at scale. So I can kind of talk through the pros and cons of those. So anytime you're dealing with more than really like 20 pages, like after 20 pages, it does become painful to do it. So one is we talked about, microdata, like building it into the template. And so you can do that with microdata, or you can actually have someone write code that generates JavaScript. Now it is technical, but there's people out there that can do it. The other piece that you can do is the Google Data Highlighter is a free tool that Google offers. That has like the very basic schema markup properties. But if you don't have budget and you need to just get it done, it's another tool that you can use in order to do that. And so that's sort of like, really technical. You have developers and you can kind of build that out. The other is sort of the free tool. And then there's tools like Schema app out there where we have like a professional highlighter where you can set it up and get it done really quickly. And then there's also sort of bulk capabilities that you can find. I call them like schema translators. And we're pretty early on. Like we don't actually have a competitor. We say that Google is probably our biggest competitor when it comes to the highlighter. But the other piece you can do is generate JSON-LD off a spreadsheet and then have Google Tag Manager pull from it. So we've actually seen or worked with some clients to do that as well. So again, it depends on your area of expertise. Google Tag Managers, so Google Tag Manager, Telium, Adobe Tag Manager, so depending on the type of technology you're using, are a great way to avoid the complexity of trying to get into the page. So as a marketer, you can use that as a way to sort of put it across scale. So if you have that dynamic JavaScript that you can build, you can put that in a tag, and that sort of reduces some of the complexity. But it really, like when we talk about at scale, part of it we ask about like what resources do you have, what skills do you have, what access to the site do you have, and then what is the best way, and then also how do you maintain it, right? So that's a lot of reason why people choose to partner with us is because you can maintain it really quickly. Once you actually build it, if you're manually writing things, or if you need a coder to maintain it, it can be hard. And last year we saw like 55 changes, both in the recommendations as well as in the vocabulary. So depending on not maybe just local business, but your schema markup across your site, it is something that you should maintain on a regular basis.
Okay, so it is potentially pretty challenging if you don't know what you're doing, but there are tools and
you don't have the skill set. That's right, yeah.
To make it happen, yeah. And I certainly wouldn't tell it on my own site, but I would talk to one of my developers because it's probably beyond my natural skills. Guy, quickly, sort of your kind of client base, how many clients have you got that have sort of multiple locations?
Maybe 20.
Okay, so a decent number. You've had the challenges of doing kind of content creation, obviously kind of link building at scale. When you've got the kind of content kind of creation side of it, how does your strategy change for a multi-location business versus a single location business? And also, how does a process change?
So we treat each location as like its own business, because again, if you're thinking about it, say you've got an office in city A and an office in city B, the city A people potentially don't care about what's going on in city B, and the city B people don't care about what's going on in city A. And so whether it's from Google My Business or local content or just a local content campaign, you know, if you're doing, say you're going to do like a scholarship for high school students in city A, you need to do a whole different one for the ones in city B if you're trying to earn links or you want to maximize the impact of those campaigns. It has to resonate with the local community. So we almost treat each of the office locations as its own business, especially, you know, it's particularly true if you've got business office locations across states or across countries or across bigger geographic regions. All that stuff that we talked about, like the language your customers use, the streets, the zip codes, the businesses in the community, who the journalists are that cover the subject matter. It's all different for every single location. So you really have to treat each of those as their own business, in my opinion.
But you have like a unifying brand, right? So there needs to be some consistency
Sure.
And replication so that brand is kind of carried throughout. Some of the keyword research you do in City A, does it have any relevance to City B, or do you have to kind of adapt it?
So some of it might, right? So like if you're talking about like head terms, so general like practice area plus whatever service, or sorry, I spoke legal, but your general kind of unbranded category terms might be similar. But don't forget that even those terms are going to be usually modified by a geographic modifier. So, you know, for us, it's like personal injury lawyer Chicago versus personal injury lawyer South Bend, Indiana versus Madison, Wisconsin. Even those categorical, non-branded categorical head terms can be much different. You know, from a branding standpoint, like, yeah, I'm not talking about having like micro sites for every office location, but if you have one site and you have multi-location pages, each of those needs to have like almost its own section for, you know, targeting those local queries with local content, with local frequently asked questions, with, you know, local resources, and all with the appropriate matching corresponding schema markup. So yeah, people that are putting like, you know, if you got a multi-location business and you're just putting like one name, address, phone combination in the footer for all your pages, like you're not, that you need to make those individual for each of the office locations.
And how do you go about with the FAQs? Because, you know, I'm presuming there will be some differences, you know, between, divorce lawyer Chicago versus divorce lawyer Boston, but majority of the FAQs will be relatively similar, particularly in the same state, because you only have legal.
That's right. So for legal, it's going to come down to the state, right? Because the answer is for those kind of queries, the answer is going to be similar because it's, you know, based on state law that you're going to provide some kind of insight. However, there are a whole bunch of other queries that are going to be more specific. So one of the things that Google always talks about, especially in legal, is that the proximity matters more than a lot of the other factors. So if you're not talking about if you're not marking up your pages and having content that's extremely hyper local, if you're expecting your frequently asked questions section to work for all of your different locations, all I would say is this: that's fine. You can have that section, and you'll capture some of the search intent for those more general queries. But for people that are like, you know, where is the courthouse for such and such, or how far is your office from the courthouse because I just got arrested for DUI, that's going to be much more specific to that location, and the content surrounding that and the markup surrounding that has to be specific to that. So you can't just, or you can, but I don't suggest that you just have like a frequently asked questions section of your site and then call it a day. I think that for the more general search intent that's not geographically specific, maybe you have that section, but then you also should be thinking about a separate section that's specific to the community, specific to the office location, that has that proximity stuff built in, that's marked up more specifically. I find that speaks to that local audience, and for if your business targets local consumers at the local level, if you're a local business and the people that are walking down the street or living around the community are your target audience, they should be your priority. That audience should be your priority, not some general search query for someone that's halfway across the state. Have it on your site, great, but don't make that the priority.
Okay, a final question on this is kind of a sort of structuring element, structuring question. Do you kind of go location then service, or do you go service then locations in terms of how you structure the content for your customers, and why?
Yeah, so that's that's a great question. So it depends again, but for let's just assume that we're dealing with a law firm, and let's assume that it's a multi-physical office location law firm. I'm going to have the location is going to be the priority, and a lot of that has to do with some of it has to do with it's Google's world and their rules, and so you don't get a GMB listing for every different practice area. You get a GMB listing for every location. And so I'm going to say make the location kind of the atomic unit, and then try to decide on categorization in GMB, and then build out categorization, service categorization around that location. And again, the other half, so half of it is probably, maybe half's too strong, but some of it's because we live in Google's world and they set the rules, and some of it is because the location, as I said earlier, to me, if you're gonna force my hand, trumps the service, because you're going to get ancillary eyeballs that might not have been, like, maybe they're looking for some kind of tangential thing. So let me give you an example. Personal injury lawyer, people that are looking for like rehabilitation or looking for car crash or auto body services, those people, because they're dealing with some of the same problems that might touch your practice, getting links and earning attention and ranking for those kind of queries locally it tends to generate additional potential client inquiries, more so than, if you rank for personal injury lawyer nationally, unless you've got a national referral network, all that traffic isn't as monetizable for you as people from other categories in your local community might be.
Oh, I'm so excited to jump in on the schema markup side of this. Can I jump in?
Yeah,
Please.
sure.
Okay, so you can connect location and services in whatever way you want, but you can actually connect it in the schema markup in both ways. And both of them have this great property called area served. So let's start, like, area served is where you actually say, like, which is the service area of this business. And so if you have different locations that serve specific areas, you can use that very specifically. And one of my best practices is to use like a Wikipedia link to reference the definition of that city or region, county, state, etc. And then when you have your location pages and then you have your services pages, the services pages are like a product. So they have something called an offer, which is actually like defining like what kind of, in a product, it's easy, like offers the price, but in a service, it could just be like, oh, defining that, like, well, we offer this, right? And it's just defining the service. Well, the locations can make offers. So you can link them and say that the locations make offers of these services. And then on the services page, you can say that these services are provided by, or the providers are these locations. And so again, everything you just said, you can actually then explicitly call out in the schema markup about how they serve regions, certain populations. There's this great property called audience that I love. So if you're a business that only serves your primary buyer is a mother, you can call that out specifically, or children, or lawyers, maybe you serve. So in the schema markup, everything Guy just said, you can mimic using the appropriate properties. And the how to do services schema markup and the ultimate guide that I think have been shared through the chat cover both of those examples.
Wow, it's amazing, isn't it? And it's so
Sorry, I
nice,
just get so
Martha.
excited.
No, it's infectious. It's wonderful. I've just been given a nudge. We are over time by 10 minutes, and so I'm going to do one thing. And sorry, Martha, you provided some lovely slides, but I'm going to whip through these just
Can I
to.
talk about yeah, this one. Can I just say like 30
Yep,
seconds
yep,
on it?
yeah,
So
sure.
multi-location is another one where you want to connect the dots, right? And so if there's a headquarters, you have that organization with an address, and then you have the sub-organizations, which are your locations. If you don't have a headquarters, like it's just one of your locations serves as that brand, you can still create like a brand schema markup or organization, but not do an address, but then still connect parent and sub to explain those relationships. And I just call that out. I'm actually due to give you a blog, Miles, for your site to talk specifically about that. And so it'll go into more detail, but it's really important that you talk about those locations and the parent, or like the parent company, whether that be the headquarters or the brand.
Okay, so you can have a brand that doesn't have a physical headquarters, but it can still be
Correct.
the kind of umbrella organization name and brand that
Yeah.
covers it. Okay, that blog post is going to be great. I'm going to look forward to reading that a
Yeah.
lot. Let me the future. What is the future of you guys? Let's give you both a minute to talk about. Guy, the future of kind of content creation, the kind of role of content, the importance, and if you're thinking, okay, in 18 months' time, these are the type of sites can be building. What insight can you give us?
Well, I think what Martha said is true. I think that the search engines want to go towards, it's in their best interest to end journeys on the search results. So the more that they can provide answers, the more that they can help users convert or find what they're looking for, another way of saying it, on the search results. Content that accomplishes that, I think that that's important. I think thinking about the impact of voice on your local content and marking that kind of stuff up, like that's kind of in the next, if you're in 18 months, I would say that. But I also think that they're, in the short term at least, within 5 years, you should still be focusing on identifying the opportunities for featured snippets and for search features and building content and marking up pages that address the existing features of today.
Okay, great. Thank you, Guy. And Martha, what's your vision of the future?
So I really believe like we're going to have to start managing our brands or our companies like for consumption of machines, right? So we need to create content and describe things for humans, and then make sure that we're thinking or acknowledging that there should be like this machine layer that we need to understand, because, the assistants are only, I think, the beginning of it. The Internet of Things is every single thing connected. So we're going to have to ask our car, where are we going to go, or who's the best lawyer in this area? Our fridge is going to be able to answer questions. And so I would just say, today, think of it as just like at the very basic, translating page by page. I always prompt people to say, like, also try to connect the dots between things so those things are explained. And then over time, just make sure it's part of your strategy from the get-go. And I'm a big believer in like trying to find ways to automate it. So whether it be through plugins to make your life easier, and then focus again on those really unique pages and making sure that they're comprehensive.
I'm so upset that we haven't got another 3 hours, because I could really go into a lot more detail with you. This has been totally fascinating and a wonderful eye-opener for me, hopefully for our audience as well. I've been looking at the attendee numbers, and pretty much everyone has hung on this far through, which is testament to the brilliance which you guys have addressed this topic. So thank you for that. I'm not going to do the third poll because we are over time. It was about voice search. Quick plug for a voice search study that we did. Let's just say thank you very much to Martha and Guy for giving us an hour and 15 minutes of their time. We will be sharing, obviously, the full webinar, the write-up, and any of the kind of additional kind of resources, materials that these guys have kind of mentioned. We'll make sure that that's available to you on the kind of blog coverage for the webinar, which is available on Friday. Martha is very kindly writing some blog posts for us. I think we might have even got Guy writing a blog post for us. If not, we absolutely should do, because he's just got a wealth of information which we want to kind of tap into. But guys, thank you so much. I really have, of all the webinars we've done so far, this has been one of the most fascinating for me, and I've loved it, and I would love to talk more. But we should wrap this up so people can get back to their busy lives. A last final plug for next month's webinar, June the 13th, link building strategies for local businesses. You've got Casey, Matt, and Fernando. Please join us for that. It's going to be an absolute cracker. It's going to certainly, well, I hope it's going to be as good as this one, because it's been an absolute gem. So to the two of you, thank you very much for your time and for joining us today. For everyone who's dialed in and listened, thank you very much. For everyone who watches this after the event, I really hope you've learned a lot from this particular webinar. So everyone, have a good day. Thank you very much. Martha and Guy, I'm going to sign off very quickly because I've got to dash out the door. You have been tremendous. Thank you very much for your time and input.
Have a good day.
Thank you. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks for having us.
Bye, guys. Bye-bye. Thank you.